Welcome back! Today we're going to be exploring life and the science of biology. So, somewhat coincidentally, there is a reason for the name of this course, and ironically, it is a bit redundant. Biology is actually defined as the study of living things, or known as the science of life. So, life biology is basically life, the science of life. So, speaking of life, what is life? Before we dive in to discussing the aspects that unify all living things, I want you all to come up with a list of criteria on your own based solely on the knowledge you have at hand. All right? So this is not for correctness at all. This is just a fun activity. And this will serve as your first check-in question for this lecture. Sound good? So all you're going to do now is you're going to come up with a list of criteria that you would use to define something as living. You're welcome to work with your lab group. In fact, I highly recommend it if you can all work collaboratively. That's always preferred for these little activities. You can do this via the discussion boards in VR or via Zoom if you'd like, or you can choose to complete it on your own if you prefer. But with that said, come up with a list of criteria that you would use to define something as living. And once you're done, we're going to go ahead and test your list, okay? So go ahead and pause the video while you make your list. Otherwise, we're going to move on. So now, for check-in number 2, we are going to apply your list, all right? So a couple of things are going to appear on the screen, and based on your list and your list alone, so not what you know to be true, but based only on the list that you've developed, are the following things considered living? We'll start with plants. Are plants considered living according solely to your list? Next, we have clams. How about fire? Next, we have bacteria, followed by protein. So, picture some protein powder. And last, water. All right. Again, this is not graded for correctness at all, just graded on whether or not you completed the task of applying these things and categorizing them as living or not based solely on your list. But checking in to see how close you were, just for funsies, here we go. That in green are considered living. Those in red are considered abiotic or non-living. So, as you may have seen based on that activity, finding things that unite all life or define something as clearly living can prove a bit tricky sometimes. So what does unite all life? What ties bacteria, such as these seen on the tongue of a human, to humans? What is in common among all life? Well, number one, all life has some semblance of organization. Life can be studied at different levels, from atoms and molecules to the entire living planet. The study of life can be divided into different levels of biological organization. Atoms make up molecules, which make up macromolecules, which make up organelles, which make up cells, and those cells make up tissues, and then so on and so forth. Depending on the questions you're asking, though, the level of organization can help identify unique properties. So what do I mean by this? Well, for example, studying life from the perspective of the biosphere is not going to give you probably much insights into the properties of ATP synthase inside of mitochondria of a goose, let's say. To look more closely at that question, right, looking at ATP synthase inside of a mitochondria of a goose, we need to reduce the level of organization that we're observing. By studying the properties of ATP synthase molecules, we can understand how they are embedded in the mitochondria organelle. If we understand the properties of mitochondria organelles, right, mitochondria, we can better understand the properties of neuron cells. And if we understand the neurons, then we can better understand why tissues are distributed the way that they are in the brain, and so on and so forth. However, studying the necessary pieces like mitochondria cannot inform you about the complete process of migration in geese, right? You need to understand the organization at a different level and how certain properties emerge at each new level. Make sense? This is the building block of all life. It is the smallest unit of life. So when we're talking about the smallest level of organization for something that's alive, this is it, and it is called a cell. All living things have one or more cells that carry out the basic activity of living. And each cell is bound by a membrane that separates it from its surroundings. Another trait that unites all life is the storage and transfer of information. On our planet, all life carries within its cells a molecule called DNA that essentially are the massive data banks for what life looks like and how it works. This is the universal genetic language that is common to all living organisms. Life persists from one generation to the next, in part by passing on this genetic information from parent to offspring. Third unifier is that all life responds to its environment. Life responds to stimuli, growing towards light, shying away from predators, opening transport proteins to molecules. The level of interaction may vary based on the level of organization, but interactions, such as responding to the environment, actually influencing the environment itself, these characteristics are ones that unite all life. Fourth, all organisms are able to grow and reproduce, and they all possess hereditary molecules, like DNA, that's passed down from parent to offspring, ensuring that the offspring are of the same species. Reproduction does not always mean sexual reproduction, though. Many organisms actually pass down their genome through something called asexual reproduction as well. But regardless, all living things go through growth, development, and reproductive phases. Next, we have energy utilization, because life is work. Moving, growing, reproducing, and other cellular processes all require work. And in order to work, we need energy. All life both takes in and uses up energy in order to continue living. But how do we get energy? It's through the process of the transfer and transformation of energy and matter. Most of the energy that life uses on our planet actually comes from the sun. And that photo energy from the sun is then transformed into chemical energy in plants, which the plant can then use to sustain its life. Animals can also then eat the plant or the plant matter, and the energy is then transferred because the matter from the plant can then be converted into energy for the animal within the animal. And then another animal can always come and eat that animal and convert their matter into energy, and so on and so on. Another thing that living beings have in common is that we maintain relatively constant internal conditions that are different from our environment, a process called homeostasis. For example, our body temperature remains pretty stable despite changes in outside temperatures, right? Your body, when it's too cold outside, for instance, will shiver, and that'll help regulate your body temperature to keep you warm, among many internal processes that also help keep you warm, much better than just shivering does. And on the flip side, let's say it's too hot. Your body has a mechanism for that too, internal ones as well as external ones, such as sweating. Another great example is blood glucose levels, so you don't become hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic. And another great example is blood pH. You're going to learn more about pH later, so hold on to this one. It actually turns out that in order for us to remain alive, your blood pH must always remain between a pH of 3.5 or 3.35, pardon, and 3.45. That's a very small range. Anything more acidic or more basic than that causes death. So it's especially important that your body is able to maintain pH homeostasis. And that goes for all living organisms. It's very important that different aspects of homeostasis are able to be maintained in order to facilitate life. And if you want to learn more about homeostasis, you can check out the video that's provided in your module by the Amoeba Sisters called Homeostasis and Feedback. And finally, all life is united through the process of evolution, which basically just means changes in a population over time in order to better survive their environment. As Theodosius Dobzhansky eloquently stated, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. An intriguing phrase, but what does it really mean? Well, basically, all organisms interact with other organisms and with their non-living environment in ways that influence their survival. And as a consequence, organisms evolve adaptations to their environment. So in essence, it means that the processes of evolution are the fundamental organizing principles of biology. In abridged terms, evolution is descent with modification, right? We're passing things down to the next generation, but with slight modifications based on the environment and survivability. So whether you are talking about very recent evolution, such as the Galapagos finches, like you see on the screen, or all of life on Earth, the processes of evolution are the same and have led to the extraordinary diversity of life on this planet. All life is united in part because of shared common ancestry. If we trace our roots back as far as science can support, again remembering that these are all just highly supported theories, we can trace our lineage back to something called LUCA, L-U-C-A, which stands for the last universal common ancestor, which was once a small single-celled organism. This is the common ancestor to all living things and lived nearly 4 billion years ago when Earth was only about 560 million years old. For Earth time, that means it was just a baby. So that's life. Now, what about the study of biology? Well, remembering that that is the study of living things, in essence, it is the science of life, how will we work together to study biology, meaning life, moving forward in this course? Let's talk about it. Now, you may be trying to organize the flood of information about biology by topics. The problem with this approach is that there are just way too many topics for this to truly ever be successful. A better way to organize ideas in your mind is using a conceptual narrative framework. Organization, genetic information, interaction, homeostasis, energy use, growth, development, reproduction, and evolutionary adaptation. These are the unifying themes in biology, and these will serve as our scaffolding upon which we will build on this course. So, how will we do this? Well, Before diving into biology at all, it is first very important that we understand the terms being thrown around throughout this course, as well as understand certain concepts upon which the study of biology is built. I call this Unit 0, because this means before we even begin to touch biological concepts, we are going to go over the chemistry and the building blocks of life. Following this, after laying a solid foundation, we will apply our scaffolding and begin our journey with biology. We will start small with the single cell, and we will focus on the organization and genetic information within the cell. So we're starting with 1 and we're starting within. Following, in Unit 2, we will zoom out a bit and look at the single cell in relation to its environment. This means we will be looking at how the cell interacts with its environment to communicate with other cells, to transport items in and out of itself, and to help maintain homeostasis, as well as how a cell uses and produces energy by using what's available to it in its environment. And then after this, we will zoom out even further and explore cell growth, development, and reproduction. In essence, this is where we will start to look at how we go from just a single cell to suddenly making many more cells. So now we're starting to look beyond the single cell and looking at multiple cells and how we get there. And then in our final unit, we will look beyond cells and discuss the theory of evolution and evolutionary adaptations, looking at species and populations. Since we would have learned about how we make more cells, we can then transition from learning just about cells to now suddenly being able to adequately study multicellular organisms, like this bee, or like you and me. In this final unit, we will apply our knowledge to learn about species, populations, and the theory of evolution. And now this brings us to our last 3 check-in questions. So, check-in number 3, making sure that we are answering question number 3 for this lesson. Reorder the following list to reflect the order in which we will study biology together in this course. Keep in mind that the list shown does not include all topics that we plan to cover. Check-in number 4. In your own words, explain why this course is organized in this fashion. And then finally, number 5. Of the 7 unifying themes of life, which aspect or which aspects are you most excited to learn more about?